So the main characters in 5 Feet Apart are Stella and Will, and then Poe, and of course the supporting cast, the nurses are also.
Good morning everyone, and happy Friday. It's January 16th, 2026, and I've got all your news for your rush hour ride to work. It's been an intense week, emotional, draining, and packed with updates. We're diving not just into the ongoing Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni situation, but later, we'll cover major commentary from podcaster Sean Ryan, who's strongly condemning the Trump administration. This is especially notable because his audience is largely conservative. He's putting the administration on blast for their handling of the Epstein files, and we'll get into that in the second half of the show. Plus, Caroline Leavitt is defending ICE, so it's a truly wild time out there. I really appreciate everyone sticking around to cover all this political and entertainment craziness. First, let's talk entertainment. It's been over a year since Liz Plank left the podcast she co-hosted with Justin Baldoni called Man Enough. She's hinted that she has more of her story to share, but so far, nothing has come out. What's new, however, is Baldoni's deposition where he explains why Liz Plank chose to go no contact. For transparency, I should mention that I've met Liz Plank briefly at a friend's party, just days or weeks before the pandemic hit. That encounter sticks in my memory because it was one of my last times out in public before toilet paper shortages and everyone stressing over what food they could eat, especially my lactose-intolerant friends. Looking at the situation, if you want to be generous toward Liz Plank, you could argue that she was in a tough spot. Perhaps she felt career pressure, or maybe she felt coerced by Blake Lively, though there's no evidence of that. On the other hand, from Baldoni's perspective, you could say she backstabbed him without cause. Some people on Blake Lively's side, who are friends with Liz, claim she knows something that hasn't been revealed, but I don't buy that. It's been over a year, and no new information has come out. Honestly, maybe it's just the kind of thing you say to justify leaving a show. Trust me, more is going to come out. We've been hearing that non-stop from multiple sources, more accusers, more information. At some point, you can't keep giving people the benefit of the doubt. You have to base your view on what's already out there. Either way, here's what Baldoni had to say about Liz Plank and her so-called no-contact request when she left the show. But first, let's revisit her statement from a year ago, which was shared with fans and obtained by People. Liz Plank wrote, "I'm writing to let you know that I have had my representatives inform Wayfarer that I will no longer be co-hosting the Man Enough podcast. Thank you for trusting me with your hearts and stories, for holding space for mine, and for making the show what it was. I will miss you, the listeners, so much. I love what this community created together with every fiber of my being, and that's because of you. As this chapter closes for me, I remain committed to the values we've built together. Thank you for being here, for trusting me, and for being by my side for the last 4 years. We all deserve better, and I know that together we can create it. I will have more to share soon as I continue to process everything that has happened. In the meantime, I will continue to support everyone who calls out injustice and holds the people standing in their way accountable." At the time, the cast's mass unfollowing of Justin Baldoni seemed shocking, even cruel. But behind the scenes, there were reports that Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, and others were pressuring Baldoni's agency to release a statement that would benefit them, essentially coercing him to comply so Liz could return to filming. Baldoni, of course, refused. This is a pattern we've seen play out in other situations. The weaponization of influence and clout. Did something similar happen with Liz Plank? Keep in mind, she's a 38-year-old independent woman, fully capable of thinking for herself. If she chose to play that game and align with certain pressures, that's her decision. Now, here's part of Baldoni's deposition. When asked, "Who is Liz Plank?" he responded, "Liz Plank is my former co-host of the Man Enough podcast." The deposition then goes on to discuss how long she was his co-host and the circumstances around her decision to step away from the show. Baldoni was asked about the timeline, maybe 3 years. What changed? What caused her to stop being your co-host? His answer was revealing. He said he imagined that the New York Times article and the world's reaction made him look like a bad man. Even in that response, he's giving her some grace. He's not saying she left because he was a bad person, but that the perception created by the article likely influenced her decision. When asked if she had told him directly, he said no. Did he speak with her when she quit? Again, nope. Did he read anything she wrote, explaining why she didn't want to continue co-hosting? He said he had seen it, but couldn't recall the details. When questioned about whether it was important to understand her perspective on ending a 3-year professional relationship, Baldoni clarified that it wasn't a matter of disinterest. He explained that when she resigned, she specifically requested that no one reach out to her. He had been informed of this by people involved in the podcast, including someone named Jamie Heath and another staff member. Baldoni assumed she simply didn't want to discuss her reasons. He made it clear that his focus at the time was elsewhere, dealing with much bigger issues. He was navigating lawsuits, including a defamation suit against the New York Times, and handling multiple complex matters simultaneously. So, while Liz Plank's departure was significant, he was managing a very high-stakes environment beyond the podcast. Baldoni's career is on fire, and he's trying to keep everything going. Even maintaining his workouts, he's clearly got a strong core, both literally and figuratively. What's wild here is seeing Blake Lively's attorney frame him as someone who doesn't care about women, basically saying he didn't care enough to ask Liz Plank how she was. But Baldoni's response is simple. She asked him not to contact her. If he had reached out, he could have been accused of violating her wishes. Now, do I think it's spineless for Liz Plank to quit the show and cut off all conversation? Honestly, yes. The whole premise of Man Enough is about communication on toxic ways to have difficult conversations, access your emotions, and handle conflict. And then, when things get complicated, she just leaves, telling everyone not to contact her. That feels contradictory to the values of the show, and frankly, a bit insane. If you want to look at it more generously, you could ask whether Liz Plank knows something we don't. I've been told by a friend of hers, someone relatively close, that she might have information that hasn't been revealed yet, but it's been over a year and nothing has come out. Personally, I don't believe it. If she truly had damning information about Baldoni, why wouldn't it have surfaced by now? Especially given all the claims circulating about harassment or abuse, there would have been evidence or testimony by now. That's where I stand. I haven't seen any first-hand accounts that support the idea that Baldoni behaved abusively, so I remain skeptical. Do I think Liz Plank is a bad person? Absolutely not. Many people make difficult or seemingly questionable choices without being bad people. Liz Plank was likely in a tough position, aware of the pressures around her, and probably thinking, better to distance myself while things are uncertain. But if you're part of a podcast like Man Enough, part of the role is taking on complicated conversations, even when they get uncomfortable. And in that light, her departure feels like a step back from the very principles the show was built on. So, Liz Plank said, there's more to come. But after a year of waiting, the longer we wait, the more it seems like there isn't actually more to come. It makes sense, right? Speaking of not more to come, here's a wild Friday story. 16 and pregnant star Farrah Abraham announced she's running for mayor of Austin, but in a recent interview with TMZ, she discovered she got the dates wrong. The Austin mayoral election isn't until 2028, not 2026. Oops. Here's how it went down. TMZ asked why she was declaring her candidacy so early. Farrah said she's super excited to run and can't wait to see who will challenge her when pressed about the timing. She insisted the election was in 2026, adding, "That's just what the office told me." TMZ tried to clarify the mayoral race is local, not federal, and the next election is in 2028. Farrah seemed a little confused but confirmed she'd run in the nonpartisan mayoral category just a couple years earlier than necessary. The hosts pointed out that Spencer Pratt is running for mayor of Los Angeles this year, and that the timing of elections differs by city. Finally, TMZ confirmed that Austin's mayoral election is indeed in 2028, aligned with the presidential cycle. So, Farrah just learned she jumped the gun, but hey, now she has a couple of extra years to prepare. Yikes, Austin. I mean, sure, vote however you want. Maybe Farrah Abraham has a great platform. But personally, I wouldn't put her in charge of the city budget. Her numbers are all off. Speaking of things that are a little off, let's talk Caroline Levitt. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. Today's episode of The Rush Hour is brought to you by Wix. Every business and brand needs a website. If you're like me, you've probably wanted to build one but procrastinated because it feels confusing and chaotic. Well, this is your sign. Wix makes it ridiculously easy to create a professional-grade website from scratch. Even with zero design experience, you can have a ready-to-use site in minutes with their AI website builder. Just answer a few questions, and boom, your site is ready. Or pick from over 2,000 templates. Wix lets you create freely, own your individuality, and scale fearlessly. It's been powering over 280 million businesses worldwide for 20 years. Sign up for free at Wix.com. That's Wix.com. Now, back to Caroline Levitt. Recently, Donald Trump made a joke about why he doesn't think the US needs midterm elections. Probably just a joke, right? But Caroline had a memorable response when asked about it. One journalist asked, "You said the president was joking about canceling elections, but Americans for generations have fought and died for this democracy. Are you saying the president finds the idea of canceling elections funny?" Caroline replied, "Andrew, were you in the room?" "No, you weren't." "I was, and only someone like you would take that so seriously and phrase it that way." Burn. She went on to propose a kind of new law for presidents. No joking allowed. As a comedian, she loves jokes in the First Amendment, but not when it comes from the president. She pointed out how dangerous casual jokes can be when floated seriously later, giving a vivid example. It's like saying, "Honey, what if we banged the neighbors together?" "I'm kidding, but did you think that was viable?" Sometimes, humor hits harder than a headline. Let's move on from there. It took a European journalist to finally ask the tough questions that American journalists have been failing to ask for almost a year. One of the biggest issues with press Q&As in the US is that journalists often don't push back. They ask a question, the government gives a vague or twisted answer, and they don't follow up. Europeans, on the other hand, can be brutal and hold political leaders accountable, really impressive in some cases. Here we see Caroline Levitt flipping the script on a journalist. Earlier, She had defended ICE agents, saying they're doing everything correctly. The journalist pushed back, citing hard numbers. 32 people died in ICE custody last year. 170 US citizens were detained, and Renee Good was shot and killed by an ICE agent. The question was simple. How does that equate to doing everything correctly? Levitt's response. She deflected, asking if the journalist was seeking her opinion. When he answered that the ICE agent acted recklessly, she immediately labeled him a biased journalist with a left-wing opinion. At that point, you can't help but shake your head. This is someone in their late 20s, probably around 27, deflecting facts with spin and bravado. The commentary here is harsh but fair. Eventually, the lies and evasions catch up, and no amount of surface polish can hide it forever. In the long run, the truth has a way of seeping through. So here's what happened next. Instead of the tough follow-up questions we rarely see from us reporters, it took a European journalist to actually press the official, and the reaction was wild. The journalist asked about deaths in ICE operations, including the high-profile Renee Nicole Good case, where a US citizen was shot and killed by an ICE agent in Minneapolis, and, rather than answer directly, Caroline Levitt immediately turned it into an attack on the reporter's motives. The exchange played out something like this. The reporter pointed out troubling facts: people have died in ICE custody, including Good, and asked how that squared with the claim that everything was correctly handled. Instead of engaging with the evidence, Levitt blurted out that he wasn't a real journalist but a left-wing activist, essentially suggesting that his questions were invalid because she didn't like them. Right there, you see the problem. Public officials get asked tough questions about real deaths and controversies, and rather than respond substantively, they deflect with personal attacks. It's the classic "you mad bro" response, the same sort of brush off you're sick of seeing when journalists in the US don't push back or ask follow-ups. In Europe, by contrast, tough questioning of leaders like this doesn't get waved off so easily. And to be clear, we're not talking about abstract numbers. This is a real woman's life. Renee Good was a mother and community member whose death at the hands of a federal officer has ignited protests, legal questions, and calls for accountability. Watching Levitt unravel that exchange, focusing on labels instead of facts, is frustrating on a basic level, and people are noticing it. Some are reacting with disbelief, others with anger, but virtually everyone recognizes that press briefing didn't answer the journalist's question, it just dodged it. When you ask someone a question, especially in public, you'd better be prepared for the answer. Caroline Levitt asked that journalist a question. He came back with facts, and suddenly she got defensive, calling him a biased hack. But honestly, that sounds like projection. If anyone looked unprepared in that exchange, it wasn't him. She accused him of bias while ignoring the reality that he clearly knew the numbers. He cited wrongful detentions of US citizens and deaths connected to ICE operations, facts that are part of the public record. And yet, instead of responding to those facts, she tried to discredit the questioner. That's not accountability. That's deflection. I'll take a journalist who asks hard questions and shows up with receipts any day of the week. When she confronted him, he didn't fold. He stood his ground. And that's exactly what journalism is supposed to look like. What makes this even more disturbing is that these aren't abstract debates. We're talking about real people being harmed. There are ongoing updates, including a young protester who reportedly lost vision in one eye after being struck during a demonstration. That didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened because tensions are escalating and accountability is being avoided. We'll get into more details on that shortly. Then you have Elon Musk weighing in on a CBS News report about an ICE agent who reportedly suffered internal injuries, framing it as though that tells the whole story. It doesn't. What's happening right now is far bigger than a single headline or a single incident. This is a serious moment, and the spin isn't working. Which brings me to Sean Ryan. If you don't know his podcast, it's massive, especially in conservative media. High production value, long-form conversations, and importantly, a willingness to talk to people across the political spectrum. He's interviewed Trump, J.D. Vance, Hunter Biden, Gavin Newsom, and Ro Khanna. That alone tells you he's not operating as a partisan hack. Now, Sean Ryan is openly criticizing the Trump administration, specifically over the handling of the Epstein files. He said something that stopped people in their tracks: that by redacting names and withholding information, the White House is actively protecting abusers. His words were blunt, emotional, and impossible to ignore. Only about 1% of the Epstein-related material has been released, despite repeated promises. And here's the thing: I can't imagine Trump taking the political hit of keeping those files sealed unless there was something in them he genuinely did not want coming out. He's not the type to fall on a sword for anyone else. Ryan also highlighted the sentencing of Robert Morris, Trump's spiritual advisor, who received just 6 months in prison for abusing a 12-year-old girl. 6 months? Let that sink in. The survivor has since come forward as an adult and told her story, and it's devastating. When you hear cases like that, it reframes the entire conversation. This is why people are angry. This is why trust is collapsing. And this is why voices like Sean Ryan's matter, because he's willing to say what others won't, even when it costs him politically or personally. That's why people are paying attention. When the survivor was asked how it felt now that it was over, She said she didn't even have the words yet, just that she was relieved it had ended. That's the reality of what these so-called spiritual leaders leave behind. These are people in positions of power and trust, and when they abuse that power, they must be exposed and held accountable. Anything less is a failure of justice. Now, let's talk about the story I referenced earlier, because this is real, and it's deeply disturbing. A 21-year-old anti-ICE protester was permanently blinded in one eye after a federal agent fired a so-called non-lethal round at close range during a protest in Santa Ana. He wasn't armed. He was holding a megaphone. Witness footage shows the moment clearly. He was standing just a few feet away when the round was fired. He immediately collapsed. This was not crowd chaos. This was a direct hit at extremely close range. Afterward, he was detained while injured and later taken for medical treatment. Doctors removed metal fragments, and to this day, they reportedly still don't have full clarity on the materials used because federal agencies have not provided detailed information. The young man has since spoken publicly. He said the force used against him was completely unnecessary, that he's small in stature, non-threatening, and that a simple push would have moved him back. Instead, he believes he was deliberately targeted. He says he genuinely feared for his life. And this is where the language matters. We keep calling these weapons non-lethal, but people have been seriously injured and in other cases, killed by them. The medical reality is that at close range, these projectiles can be devastating. Doctors have acknowledged that had the impact been slightly different, the outcome could have been fatal. Imagine if this were your son, your brother, your friend, someone exercising their right to protest and ending up with permanent, life-altering injuries. This isn't hypothetical. This is happening now. And that's why accountability matters. Not slogans, not spin. Facts, consequences, and transparency. Because once you see stories like this, it becomes impossible to pretend everything is being done correctly. Doctors removed metal fragments, roughly the size of a coin, from his eye. He's now blind in that eye, and will likely deal with long-term consequences for the rest of his life. It's an absolute tragedy, one that never should have happened. Now, shifting gears slightly, I guess this is being framed as good news. Donald Trump says he has received a Nobel Peace Prize. He didn't win one. It was presented to him by a Venezuelan opposition figure. Trump posted that it was an honor to meet Maria Corina Machado of Venezuela, and that she gifted him her Nobel Peace Prize in recognition of his work, calling it a gesture of mutual respect. But let's talk about that word, peace. At the same time, we're hearing threats involving Greenland, Mexico, and Canada. There are escalating tensions tied to Venezuela, Iran, and Russia, and reports of oil seizures and proxy conflicts. Whatever is happening right now, peace doesn't exactly feel like the most accurate description. So that's where things stand. We'll be back this afternoon, don't miss it. I'm interviewing a congressional candidate, and it's exactly the kind of conversation I want this channel to be about. Thoughtful, substantive discussions on how to move the country towards something better than where we are today. I know it's hard to stay optimistic when you see stories like the ones we covered today. I'm not trying to shield anyone from reality. It really does feel like a war zone in a lot of ways. But the only way forward is to stay engaged, learn from what's happening, and push for something better. Thank you to everyone who's newly subscribed and joined the community. Your support matters more than you know, especially when having honest conversations feels harder than it should be. We'll be back this afternoon, twice a day, every day. I'm Dave, and this is The Rush.